Gwestai arbennig. Now I want to hand over to our special guest. He's a British adventurer, an extreme athlete, a twice world first record holder, a Thai fighter. If I'd have known that, I'm not sure I'd have sat next to him. A master scuba diver, and described by FHM magazine as one of the world's most fearless outdoor men. Quite an impressive repertoire. He was winner of the 2015 UK Adventurer of the Year and 2016 Welsh Adventurer of the Year award. But most importantly, he's a former student of Coleg Llanrithon, where he's undertaken outdoor education, I think in 2008 he told me. Therefore, can I please ask you to give a warm round of applause to Ash Dykes.
They say the world's a small place, but that's only if you're on the usual track. Will I make it? I have to. I've faced many challenges before, but this is my biggest yet. I do worry, I do have fears, but I never doubt myself. There are dangers, there are risks, but I'm feeling prepared. Hello, it's great to be here at the awards ceremony. Now this expedition was about 6 months ago I returned now. It's good to be back alive and with all my limbs still attached. But before I talk about the Madagascar expedition, I just want to go through a brief overview on how it all begun. So before I went on these travels and adventures, I was actually studying a BTEC National Diploma in Outdoor Education, which was a great course, a 2-year course, provided plenty of theory and also plenty of practical work, hands-on experience. And it was during this course that I figured out that I learned far more through experience and things for myself than anything else. And I remember in between year 1 and year 2, all the rest of the students pretty much looked like they had it all figured out. Some were going off to university, others were going to the military, and I felt I was the only one without a plan. And I wanted to head off traveling to further develop myself, to experience the world and see how I handle certain situations and scenarios. But I thought that's all easier to think than to actually do. You know, I was 17 at the time, I had a job as a waiter, and all of my money that I earned went towards the car that I was driving at the time. So the more that I thought about this, the more I wanted to make it happen. So I focused on sectioning it out because it was too difficult to actually visualize the end goal of leaving the UK at such a young age. So I sectioned it out and tick off each section. And in the summer holidays between the college course, I concentrated on getting my lifeguard. I found work a few months later, enabling me to quit my job as a waiter, and now I was able to fund myself with a much better income. On completion of the outdoor course, I sold my car, I bought a push bike, and I was cycling every day to and from work just across the road in Llandudno Swimming Centre. So I was now earning a good income. I met a friend who was up for travelling as well, which was great. I had a travel companion. And I thought to myself, it's all good going out travelling, but eventually I'll run out of money, I'll be forced to come back to square one, and everyone would have moved on with their lives and careers. So I thought, let's get a qualification that will enable me to work and live abroad. So I did. I looked at getting my scuba diving. I trained as an open water advanced and rescue diver. The next step being a dive master, and this again was in Wales, this is in Llanberis. I went through the visas, the vaccinations, the insurance, and between 18 months and 2 years later, me and my friend set off around the world. And the first place we went to was China, which was incredible. You know, we were trekking the Great Wall of China, we were soaking up the local culture. But about a month into travels, I realised I'm very much on the beaten track. I share the same photos, stories, and experiences as all the rest of the travellers, and I just wanted something a little bit more wild and a bit more adventurous. So we went further down south to Cambodia. We were both sulking on the Mekong River, saying we spent way more money than anticipated and that we hadn't taken on any cool adventures yet. So I recommended to my friend, I suggested, how about we purchase the cheapest and nastiest bicycles we can find, cycle Cambodia, and then the length of Vietnam. So after we laughed about the plan, we decided to go for it and search down for the worst bike we could find, which we certainly did. This is Elder, and there's no gears, there's no suspension. It's got a little bell, a basket on the front. It was all really low budget, so we found string on the side of the road that we used to strap our rucksack on the back with. The locals were saying, don't do it, you're crazy. You can't cross the border from Cambodia to Vietnam without a guide, and you can't cycle the length of Vietnam, especially on those bikes, which they could have been right. But we decided to go for it anyway. It's up to us to find out whether we can or can't make it. But it was a reckless cycle, it was dangerous. We had no pump, we didn't even have a puncture repair kit. We spent 1 or 2 minutes on Google preparing, and then off we went. And it was, like I said, it was dangerous. We were chased by dogs, we were hit by mopeds, dodged by lorries. I think the last day we cycled 39 hours straight, all the way through the day, all the way through the night, and again through the following day. But we made it after 1,100 miles. We made it to the northern point, despite the bikes breaking 17 times in total. And so this was the catalyst. This is how I begun the adventure career, pretty much. I was hooked on adventure. I learned and developed myself so much on this that I continued. I went over to Thailand, I crossed the border into Burma, and learned how to survive in the jungle with the Burmese hill tribe. From using berries as mosquito repellent, to building bamboo shelters, to hunting, to gathering. It was an amazing experience. We then hopped over to Australia to try our hand at a bit of work, a bit of fruit picking, and to take on a few more different adventures in Australia. And we had a once-in-a-lifetime 12-month opportunity with the visa, but we only lasted 3 months. It was just too expensive for us. We decided to go back to Asia because we missed the food, the locals, the culture, and the lack of health and safety. And so we ventured back, but this time we went to India. We went right up North India and started doing treks in the Himalayas. Now again, I don't recommend this to anyone at all, but we were on a low budget and we couldn't even afford a permit, but decided to go for it anyway, trying to avoid the Pakistan army. And so it was now time, the money was running low, and I needed to focus on the plan B, which was to progress at scuba diving and hopefully find work. And I was successful. For the next 2 years, I was working and living in Thailand on 2 different islands, Koh Tao and Koh Lipe, as a master scuba diving instructor, teaching people from all over the world how to deep dive, how to dive in wrecks. This was my office. It was a great lifestyle, and I always have been quite competitive and wanted to compete and looked after my fitness. So whilst I was out there, I was training and competing against the locals in the local martial art of Muay Thai. Now this was all good, but 2 years later I really started to miss all the previous adventures and expeditions I'd gone up to. It was playing on my mind, it was my passion, and I just didn't want to ignore it. So I got the world map out, even though I had a few £100s in my bank only, and I started looking at extreme countries that I knew very little about. And Mongolia instantly stood out as a country that's very little talked about. I was on the travel route, and yet I hadn't seen anyone who had gone to Mongolia or planned on going, so that excited me. I wanted to walk maybe 100 miles or 200, then I discovered I may as well go for the entire length and walk the length of Mongolia. I thought the best way to go about this is to find someone who has done this solo and unsupported trek across the country before, and after doing extensive research, I couldn't find any evidence to suggest that it had been done. But there was someone who had attempted, and he was the first man ever to attempt a solo and unsupported walk, but unfortunately was evacuated just after the halfway point, which was really intimidating for me because he was a Navy soldier and a desert explorer, far more experienced, and of course I'm neither of those. But I reached out to him anyway and said, what would you say the risks are, the hazards that I should watch out for? And he got back with this very intimidating email saying you need to watch out for the sandstorms, the snow blizzards, the dry wells, the stagnant water, the grey wolves, the drunken nomadic drifters, and the list just went on and on, enough to make me reevaluate the map and look at potentially trekking a safer, more populated country. But I decided to focus in. Just because it hadn't been done before doesn't mean it can't be. And I had to focus on getting a logistics manager, local to Mongolia, who knew extensive experience around the country. And I did. I found a logistics manager. I sent a very amateurish email to ask him if he believes it's possible to walk solo and unsupported. And he got back saying he doesn't believe it's possible, but he's more than happy to help with the logistics, which again was scary. This was my official GPS route. I couldn't go too close to the border because there was a high chance of me being shot. So I wanted to go to the most western city, to the most eastern city. I'd be trekking over the Altai Mountains, across the Gobi Desert and up through the Mongolian steppe. I would have to carry all of my supplies in a homemade trailer weighing up to 18 stone or 120 kilograms. And whilst I gave up my life in Thailand, sold all of my kit, moved back in with my parents to the UK to make it happen, I was starting to face a lot of negativity, people saying they really don't believe it's possible to walk it, experience people who had been there, which stayed in my conscience, and I was really quite scared, quite fearful, but I decided to try and keep that positive mindset and attempt it nevertheless. I was training, I was doing solo treks in the Alps, training in my back garden for 3 hours every day. I found a sponsorship which managed to just about fund the expedition, and it gave me the go-ahead. So I flew out to Mongolia, flew to the most western city, and started to walk. Now this was 3 weeks into the expedition. You can now see that the Altai Mountains are far behind me. I had faced snow blizzards. I was told by the locals I'd be eaten alive by the wolves that are hunting up ahead of me, which was worrying. But I pushed on regardless, and I was looking forward to the heat of the Gobi Desert. But I got none of that. I got sandstorms, hailstorms, rainstorms for the next 2 weeks, and I had to completely cover up until that subsided. The sun came out. It was 40 plus degrees Celsius for a couple more weeks, and I started slipping into severe heat exhaustion. There was no breeze, there was no natural shade. The only shelter that I could get was underneath my trailer. I had minimal water left, and the remaining water that I did have was hot water. And it was at this point I realized, if I don't keep getting up out of the trailer and pushing on, I could quite easily die out here in the Gobi Desert. But it took a lot of motivation for me to pick myself out, get back into the sun, strap that 18 stone trailer and keep pulling it through the mix of gravel and soft sand. But I knew I had to, and I sectioned it out like I did in college before I went on to do my travels. It was too difficult for me to visualize the end goal, so I focused on section it out, get out of my trailer, walk for maybe 100 or 200 meters, and then hide back underneath my trailer. And for the next few days, I was making slow and painful progress, but I made it to the settlement just about with a bit of luck on my side, and I was off the radar in this settlement for a good week, trying to recoup, trying to recover and get rehydrated before I slipped into heat stroke. And I managed to buck up the courage and strength, and I pushed on through the Mongolian steppe, faced the storms, and made it to the most eastern city in Mongolia, becoming the first person ever to do so solo and unsupported. And I guess it just goes to show that it doesn't matter if nobody else sees it for you, because it's important that you see it for yourself. Listen to them, absorb it, take it in, but don't let it stop you. And this opened a whole load of opportunities. I had a small feature up on Discovery Channel, Channel 5, I went on tour around the UK, but most importantly, I was able to continue what I was passionate about and start focusing on my next expedition, which was Madagascar. Now, Madagascar is off the southeast coast of Africa. It's the 4th largest island in the world in terms of landmass. It's 2.5 times the size of the UK. And my idea was to walk from the southern point straight up to the north point, 1,600 miles, over the Central East mountainous ridge and summiting the 8 highest mountains along the way. Now, I always believe in helping the country that you're trekking through, so I partnered up with the Lima Network Conservation to spread awareness of the unique biodiversity, the fact that 80% of all wildlife and plant life is found nowhere else in the world. So these are the lemurs, and there's over 100 different species of lemur, endemic to Madagascar, found nowhere else in the world in the wild. I also partnered up with a tourism minister to help promote Madagascar. I came across a lot of locals along the way, from coastal African tribes to Asian highland communities, and it was incredible seeing how they lived. But of course, it wasn't all fun and games. I did have my dangers, that being the crocodile-infested rivers. These are Nile crocodiles, and I had a lot of rivers to cross. On some sections, I had to build a raft using natural resources in order to cross that particular river. I contracted the deadliest strain of malaria. It was only a few hours from slipping into a coma, but was lucky enough to push on to the nearest city and have it eradicated out of my system before it was too late. I was faced by leeches, I had spider bites, I was held up by the military. There was times that I was broken physically and mentally, but then this isn't just with what I do, it's with anyone. Once you have a dream or have a vision, it's not going to be plain sailing. There are going to be difficult times, and I kept telling myself that the dark times, they've not come to stay, they've come to pass. Whatever you go on to in the future, it's all about picking yourself up, especially if there's no one there to motivate you or make decisions for you. And so I did that. I had to pick myself up, act cool and concentrated, and continue to plough on through the jungle to make it, after 155 days, to the most northern point of Madagascar, again becoming the first recorded person ever to do so whilst summiting the 8 highest mountains. And I guess this takes me back to before I went to Mongolia. I had all the doubts, I had all the fears, but I kept telling myself, you must mentally believe it before you physically go on to do it and achieve it. Congratulations to everyone in here once again, and I wish you all the best of luck in your future. Much appreciated.
Well, I'm not sure how I follow that, to be honest, Ash. It's a fantastic story, very inspirational, and I must admit that when the wife drags me out for a Sunday morning walk and I complain, I won't do it again. I'll just go quietly and be reminded of your presentation. That's an absolutely fantastic story, absolutely fantastic, and to think that it all started at Coleg Llandrillo and that the course inspired you to be thinking in this way is a testimony to your tutors, and I know you've met some of them already this evening. So can I ask you again to give a really good round of applause for Ash, please?